I'd been with Henry for 5 years, and he gave me the proposal of the century. But the night before the wedding, I caught him, in a frenzy, pinning his foster sister against the wall. I was only with her to keep her away from Eric. Are you really gonna watch me marry someone else? I didn't want to be the third wheel in their dramatic love story. As I was gearing up to call off the wedding, someone grabbed my wrist. The person leaned in and whispered in my ear, I'm planning on crashing a wedding. Want to join me? The night before the wedding, I went to the hotel to deliver some props we'd use for games during Henry's arrival. Turns out, the elevator was down for maintenance. And I couldn't reach him on his phone. Left with no choice, I took the stairs up to his floor. As soon as I stepped out of the stairwell, there was Henry, pinning a woman against the wall. His phone was lighting up with our unique ringtone. I instinctively froze. Henry hadn't noticed me at all. He was gripping her wrist, clearly agitated. You wanted to see Eric, so I staged the perfect proposal for Tina, made sure it went viral everywhere. You said you liked him, so I pursued Tina, just to keep her away from Eric. But Judy, are you seriously gonna watch me marry someone else? The woman seemed uncomfortable, struggling a bit, and I caught a glimpse of her face. A chill swept over me. It was Henry's foster sister, Judy. Her gaze flickered toward my direction, lips curving slightly. But when she looked back at Henry, her eyes were welling up. She clutched his shirt, choking out, I know you chased Tina for me, but I really don't want you to sacrifice your own happiness for me. You should call off the wedding. And with that, Henry's restraint snapped. He kissed Judy passionately. Then they stumbled into the room, still kissing. I couldn't hold it anymore and doubled over, dry heaving. I met Henry 6 years ago. I was hanging out with friends at a bar, alone, and accidentally drank a spiked drink. When things looked bleak, Henry saved me. He took me to the hospital and stayed with me all night. When I woke up, he was serious, explaining the dangerous situation I had been in. At first, I was just grateful. No other feelings. But from that day on, Henry slowly made his way into my life. He'd always coincidentally bump into me, shared similar interests, and dressed exactly the way I liked. It all seemed too targeted, so I was cautious. He didn't rush. He pursued me for over a year. During that time, I started to waver. After all, Henry was the eldest son of the prominent Henry family on Wall Street, with power, influence, and good looks to boot. What could he possibly gain from me? So I decided to give Henry a chance, and our relationship grew into a romance. We've been together for 5 years now. 2 months ago, Henry proposed to me in grand style. People told me later that he spent over half a year planning it. I stared blankly at the closed door, unable to reconcile the image of the man who knelt and promised to love me forever with the one who just kissed his foster sister. If I hadn't come tonight, they'd probably conspire after their passion, plotting how to humiliate me with a runaway groom. I straightened up, wiped away my tears, and headed to the banquet hall where tomorrow's wedding would be held. Seeing the photo of Henry with eyes so gentle and full of love for me, I picked up scissors and shredded it. Then noticed the flowers nearby. Henry had said he'd handpicked each one. I tore them all apart. Everything had already been paid for by Henry. So I had no guilt about demolishing it all. After half an hour of destruction, I felt somewhat relieved. I hired 2 people to ensure all the wedding decorations were demolished by dawn. On my way out of the hall, a cold wind made me shiver. Just as I was about to leave, a jacket was draped over my shoulders. I looked up, startled. It was Eric. The same Eric Henry and Judy were talking about earlier. Seeing my disheveled state, he paused. With the wedding tomorrow, why are you crying like this? Before I could answer, he continued, did that jerk make you upset? Recalling what I just witnessed made me feel nauseous all over again. Seeing this, Eric turned to confront Henry. I grabbed his arm, no need, the wedding's off. Eric stopped and looked at me, brow furrowed. For a moment, we both just stood there. Eric and I were neighbors growing up, but after I met Henry, Eric went abroad. Lately, I hadn't heard about his return at all. So I had no clue where the whole keeping Eric away narrative came from. After a long silence, Eric asked, "What happened?" It wasn't my fault, and I had no desire to cover for Henry. Plus, Eric was kind of part of the issue too. I told him everything I saw and heard. Eric was left speechless, shaking his head. What a mess. Dragging other people into their filthy affair? Disgusting. I smirked. Exactly. Everyone's just a pawn in their epic love play. Eric stared at me. I don't know how much time passed before he suddenly said, "I'm thinking of crashing a wedding tomorrow. Are you in?" He seemed a bit tense, lips pressed tight, avoiding my eyes. When I didn't respond right away, he added, "That Judy girl supposedly has a thing for me, right? So much so, that she made Henry woo you just to avoid us crossing paths. If I were the groom instead, wouldn't that be intriguing?" I looked down, my mind racing. That sounds satisfying to hear. But what next? What do we do? Thinking about it, I shook my head. "I'll tell everyone the wedding's off, thank you for the gesture." With that, I turned to leave. Eric quickly blocked my way. In his hurry, his words were all jumbled up. Actually, I want to ask you a favor." I paused, looking back at him. Eric spoke rapidly. "Having someone like her into me is disgusting. So, just do me a favor and help me get rid of her. As for what happens afterward, we can announce our breakup a little while after the wedding. That way, neither of them would get off easily, and it solves the immediate issue." After he finished speaking, he looked at me cautiously. "What do you say?" "Sounds good. But..." I pointed to the banquet hall. "I just told them to wreck the wedding venue. It's probably done by now. Money talks, things get done real fast." Eric smirked slightly. "No big deal, I'll handle it." Eric really put his money to work. Overnight, the wedding setup was moved to another hotel. Our mutual friends got the last-minute change and were pretty surprised. When they got to the door and saw Eric as the groom in the wedding photos, they were even more baffled. Sneaking into my dressing room, they wanted answers. Looking in the mirror, I smiled. The groom changed. Hearing that, they exchanged a glance. After a while, a girl cautiously asked, "You finally figured it out?" I paused a bit. Someone nudged her, signaling her to stop. She pretended not to notice, relieved. Actually, on the day Henry proposed, I saw. Seeing my indifferent expression, she braced herself and continued, "I saw Henry kissing Judy, but it was too dark back then. I didn't have proof to tell you directly." I said nothing. It's disgusting. Henry, swearing love to me, was making time for Judy. But beyond the disgust, I felt nothing else. I gave her a small smile. "It's fine, don't worry about it." Only then did she relax, complimenting my makeup and dress. Just then, Eric softly knocked on the door. "The ceremony's about to start, ready?" Seeing him in his outfit, the room went silent for a moment. Quickly, friends excused themselves to get seated. Eric dropped his cold demeanor instantly. In the mirror, he kept watching me. Feeling a bit awkward, I wiggled my finger at him. "Where'd you find this in such short notice?" "Fits my finger perfectly." Startled, Eric quickly averted his gaze, looking a bit uneasy. "Borrowed it." I nodded, not asking further. The wedding ceremony went off without a hitch. With Eric holding my hand throughout, my anxiety settled. Until after the wedding, as we headed to the party location off-site, we saw Helen's entire family waiting outside the venue. As soon as the door opened, Helen pointed at me in rage. "Our family spent so long planning for the wedding, and you not only had it trashed but moved it, and even swapped the groom last minute?" Eric frowned and was about to respond, but I stopped him. I looked Helen in the eye. "Your son lied about the marriage, then eloped. Why should I stick around to be a laughing stock?" With that said, whispers started circulating among the guests behind her. Lied about marriage? What does that mean? Eloped? So, was it Henry's fault? Exactly. If it weren't Henry's fault, why wouldn't he show up on his wedding day? Notice something? We're missing someone today. The group scanned the room and quickly realized. Judy, usually glued to Helen, was nowhere to be seen. Helen, overhearing the crowd's murmur, turned red. Eloped? He told me it was because Judy had an accident, and he couldn't. She stopped mid-sentence, falling silent. By now, what more did she need to understand? Henry obviously bailed on the wedding, worried about his reputation, and blamed everything on me. Eric chuckled coldly. Why not just check the hospital records if there's an accident? And why would you need the groom to drive anyone to the hospital? Helen calmed down bit by bit. She looked at me. Tina, did Henry really? It was hard for her to speak. She took a deep breath to say it. Did Henry really flee? I nodded, yes, and the reason is Judy. Helen staggered, nearly losing her balance. After a long pause, she said, I was impulsive. I'm sorry, dear. Eric's expression was still sour, but he stayed silent. With her reputation at stake, Helen decided to leave with her family. Meanwhile, Eric and I remained unfazed, taking our friends to the next venue. Caught up in the cheerful atmosphere, the gloom left my heart, and I joined in the fun. But after drinks and laughter, a few friends suddenly started egging us to show our marriage certificate. Someone chuckled, Eric's always got a stone face. I want to see what he looks like on the marriage certificate. Just as they said it, another chimed in, stone face? Didn't you see him smiling at Tina the whole night? I couldn't help but look over at Eric in the distance. Sure enough, our eyes met mid-air. He acted like he was shocked, quickly looked away, and downed his drink. Someone, feeling bold from the booze, called him over, insisting on seeing the marriage certificate. Eric came by and casually said, we haven't got the certificate yet. Seeing everyone's faces turn weird, I quickly added, the date isn't set yet. We're having the ceremony first, then we'll get the certificate. Hearing that, people didn't push further, they just said we'd have to post the certificate online once we got it. Things quieted down, and Eric sat next to me, his hand resting on his knee, nervously asking, what you said just now, was it true? I hesitated, I don't think we need to. The wedding's already over. Eric lowered his lashes, his emotions were hard to read. But they want to see the certificate. What if we don't get it? I stayed silent. Delaying doesn't work with them at all. They won't quit until they see the photo. Eric studied my expression, then suggested, we could actually get the certificate, just to make it look real. We can change it after everything's done. I raised an eyebrow at him, but isn't everything already over? He looked a bit uneasy under my gaze, not really, someone's bound to stir things up again. He was still racking his brain for excuses when I cut him off, then let's get it. The next time I got a message from Henry was after Eric and I had collected the certificate. I didn't care much about his issues but heard a bit from Eric. Apparently, after Helen left the hotel that day, she couldn't contact Henry or Judy at all. Remembering the conversation Eric and I had that day, she was so mad, she cut off their credit cards. But no one told Henry what really happened. Without the cards, Henry and Judy were struggling. Henry seemed to think I was in a bad way after he broke off the engagement, which made Helen so angry. To cool his mom down, he sent me an apology text. Tina, I'm sorry for hurting you. Reading it, I realized I'd forgotten to block him. Before blocking, I texted back, feeling sorry? Go die. Then I blocked him without a second thought. Just after turning off my phone, a message from Helen came through. She said her poor parenting had hurt me. She insisted Henry had to earn my forgiveness. She even hoped we could patch things up. Eric saw the message and quipped, bigamy's illegal, you know. I nodded, oh. I figured it out long ago. He insisted on marrying me to cut off the slightest chance with Henry. But honestly, he overestimated my feelings for Henry. With someone as awful as Henry, I'm not a garbage can. I fired off a lengthy message to Helen. Auntie, there's no way between Henry and me. I'm married now, so let's not keep in touch. After sending, I blocked her too. I wasn't oblivious to Helen's intentions. She knew it was Henry who bailed on the wedding when she came to confront me. But she didn't see it as a big deal. What made her mad was how quickly I moved on. When she found out Henry ditched me for Judy, everything changed. She wanted me back with Henry to cover up the scandal. For that, she'd lower herself. Eric's lips twitched at my actions. He tried not to smile as I looked at him. You're not dumb. You saw through her. My expression darkened. One more chance for a compliment. Eric cleared his throat. You're very not dumb. I turned away without a glance. Move your stuff to the guest room. Eric stared, confused. Why? I smiled, because I don't want to see you. 2 days later, a message from my best friend came through. She seemed excited, sending several long voice messages. When they slowed down, I played the first one. Tina, you have no idea how satisfying that was. Henry thought you were at my place and came looking, asking where you were. I just told him you're married now. I don't think he believed it, but I really let him have it. I even chased him off with a broom. Remembering her past glories, I chuckled. I've always admired your attack skills. She replied with another voice message, but be careful. If he shows up, have Eric handle it so you don't get hurt. Warmth spread through my heart as I sent her a kiss emoji. After who knows how many people he asked, Henry showed up at my place. He instinctively tried using his fingerprint to enter, but it wouldn't unlock. He kept trying until the lock alarm went off before switching to knocking. But he kept at it without anyone answering. Henry, who was always catered to, was losing it. Back then, I'd come downstairs to meet him. After half an hour, he lost all patience, banging on the door furiously. Tina. Tina. I could vaguely hear Judy shouting, take it easy, careful with your hand. Eric came out of the shower and went straight to the door. He looked Henry up and down. What do you want with my wife? Henry and Judy just froze in place. A minute later, Judy let out an excited scream and rushed towards him. You're back. Eric stepped back, avoiding her, with a look of disdain. I don't have a sister like you. Judy was momentarily awkward. Before she could say anything, Eric asked again, why are you looking for my wife? That's when Henry finally caught on. He asked in disbelief, Tina is really married? To you? Judy's smile froze on her face. She denied it repeatedly. No way. Absolutely not. How could you marry Tina? She looked at Eric, confirming once again, you're joking, right? Henry wasn't convinced either. He tried to push past Eric to find me. But Eric didn't budge, and Henry stumbled back a step. Tina can't have married you. It's not possible. Eric, rather tired of the back and forth, pulled out 2 bright red marriage certificates from his jacket pocket. Afraid Henry might try to grab for them, he opened them up. See for yourself. Tina, my wife, legally. Judy stared hard at those marriage certificates, screaming hysterically, how could you marry Tina, how could you? Henry frowned slightly and scolded quietly, Judy. Judy seemed oblivious, just kept repeating that sentence. Henry snapped back to reality and tried to push inside again. I don't believe it, let me see Tina, let me see her. I was worried Eric might not handle it alone, so I stepped out to check. Just in time to see Eric lift his long leg and kick Henry way off. Then he simply shut the door. I was dumbfounded. Just, that straight up and rough? Eric turned around and saw me, instinctively stuffing the marriage certificates back into his pocket. I frowned. Didn't I put those away? Why are you carrying them? Eric looked a bit sheepish. Your best friend messaged me to protect you. I figured he'd show up. He spoke softer with each word. Isn't this more effective than arguing? Seems like Henry heard my voice, knocking on the door again. Tina. Did you marry Eric just to make me regret it? I rolled my eyes, didn't bother responding. Henry soon had bigger issues to deal with. Because, even through the door, I heard Judy yelling at him, "Didn't you say they wouldn't ever meet? Why did they get married? It's all your fault. You're useless, useless." Henry seemed embarrassed, coaxing and dragging Judy away by force. Eric and I walked away from the monitor. Eric's expression was kinda indescribable. "She actually likes me, that's seriously creepy." I nodded in agreement. Eric changed his tone. "Good thing you saved me. If you hadn't agreed to marry me, I'd be stuck dealing with that lunatic." I raised an eyebrow. "So how will you thank me?" Eric peered out the door to ensure they'd left, then undid his top button. "If you don't mind, maybe I could." He didn't finish the sentence, but I totally got it. Blushing, I picked up a cushion nearby and tossed it at him. "Eric." Eric dodged my attack with a slight movement. I shot him a look, then returned to the study to continue working. Eric soon followed me in. He didn't speak, just watched me silently. Only when I pressed save and shut down the computer did he speak. "I think those two will come back again. How about we go on a honeymoon to avoid them?" I nodded in agreement. Avoiding them was absolutely the smart move. Facing those two head-on was just plain stupid. Eric and I clicked immediately, booking flights for the evening. By the time the surveillance alerted us again, Eric and I had already landed in a neighboring state. The moment we landed, Eric and I went to try out a famous escape room. I had seen countless recommendations but never gone because Judy was scared, so Henry had removed it from our plans. I shook off thoughts of those annoying people and focused on the puzzles. The escape room wasn't too hard, and Eric and I cleared it quickly. Everything went smoothly. Until right before we left, an NPC jumped out from a side room. I screamed in fright and dove right into Eric's arms. Caught off guard, Eric stepped back, bumping into a sharp decoration piece behind him. He let out a low hiss. But one hand still held me tight. My heart was racing, took me a while to calm down. Once out in the bright lights, I noticed a small blood spot on Eric's back. I gently pulled his hand. "Eric, you're hurt." Eric took my hand, smiling. "It's nothing, just need some ointment." I looked it up on my phone and dragged Eric to the nearest pharmacy. Back at the hotel, I asked him to take off his shirt. Eric's ears suddenly turned red. "I can do it myself." I nodded, handing him the ointment and cotton balls. "Sure, let's see how you manage." The spot he hurt was out of his reach. Despite many attempts he just couldn't get it right. 5. The medicine wasn't applied properly, and pulling at the wound made it hurt even more. Seeing me just standing there with my arms crossed, watching the show, he shifted his gaze and suddenly yelped, "Ow!" I couldn't help but roll my eyes before grabbing the ointment to help him out. But Eric's a clever guy. Helping him apply the medicine wasn't enough. He'd let out a quiet moan of pain every now and then. I didn't think too much of it at first and instinctively blew on it to soothe him. But after a while, I caught on to his game. I intentionally poked him where he wasn't hurt. Sure enough, Eric took the bait and yelped. Smirking, I packed up the cotton and disinfectant, watching him leisurely. "Eric." He didn't realize he'd been caught. I pressed firmly on his back. "You're not even hurt there, what's with the fake cries?" Eric froze, then sheepishly admitted, "I forgot." He snuck a glance at me. "You were so worried, I thought my injury was really bad." He had planned to use it as a chance to get my sympathy. Who knew it was just a tiny scratch? I found it amusing but stayed silent on purpose. Eric must have thought I was mad, so he turned around to explain, "I didn't crash into things on purpose." He wasn't wearing a shirt, and as he turned, his abs were right in front of me. I found myself unable to look away. Eric understood the situation immediately. Playing the sympathy card might not work on me, but maybe flaunting his looks would. So he didn't say anything more, but from that moment on, he did everything he could to flaunt his body. Whether it was conveniently forgetting a towel after a shower or changing right in front of me. By the third day, I'd had enough. I tackled him. Eric, satisfied yet cheeky, leaned in close when I was at my sleepiest. If I'd known you liked it this way, I'd have tried seducing you 5 years ago. But by the time he said the second half, I was too asleep to hear it. By the 7th day of our honeymoon, Henry called again. This time, he was cautious. He let someone else speak first, only picking up when I responded. He even disguised his voice, worried I'd recognize him. He quickly started, "Tina, I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have run away from our wedding for Judy, let alone hurt you for her." "Tina." I interrupted him, "Henry, I saw and heard you and Judy kissing at the door that day." Henry's explanation abruptly stopped. I didn't wait and hung up, blocking this new number 2. Eric frowned. He hasn't given up. I shrugged, maybe he regrets it. But his regret has nothing to do with me. That night, Eric and I were just back from a walk when someone blocked our path. It was Judy. Her expression twisted when she saw Eric and me holding hands. "Let go. Let go." Eric furrowed his brow and instinctively shielded me behind him. Judy, seeing this, was even more riled up. She pointed at me, yelling, "Tina. My brother saved you, how can you abandon him?" Eric and I stepped back, ready to make a run for it while Judy was having her episode. But every time we stepped back, she stepped forward. Eventually, she tried to grab Eric's hand. "Eric, don't be with Tina. She was drugged once, and my brother saved her." I couldn't help but laugh, and then what? I'm supposed to pledge my life in gratitude? Even when you two are making out right in front of my eyes, I should cheer and applaud? Judy seemed to be hit where it hurt, shaking her head. "No, it's not like that, Eric, I didn't. Not that I'd ever be interested in someone like Henry." Just as she finished, Henry's voice came from behind, "Judy." He was looking at Judy, eyes full of disappointment. Judy jumped, startled, but quickly turned resolute when she looked at Eric and me. "I was never into you. If it weren't for needing your help to deal with Tina, why would I cling to you? You're so useless. I gave you so many good ideas, and you still couldn't get it done. Watching them marry, Henry, I hate you." Henry's expression turned icy. Right in front of Eric and me, the two culprits started turning on each other. Henry marched over to Judy, grabbing her by the neck and growling, "If you liked Eric so much, why didn't you tell him it was all your setup, that you drugged Tina and had me save her?" Seeing Eric's disgusted gaze, Judy hurried to explain, "No, Eric, it's all lies from Henry." Eric pushed her away. "I have nothing to do with you. Don't call on me like that, it's disgusting." Henry looked at us, then at Judy, incredulous. "He wasn't your boyfriend? You lied to me?" Judy's eyes darted, unable to meet Henry's. By this point, what else did Henry need to hear? He shoved Judy aside, then tried grabbing my hand, saying, "Tina, she tricked me. She said Eric was her boyfriend and that you were always pestering Eric, trying to take him away. So that's why I got close to you and why I ran away from the wedding. Tina, I was just fooled. Can you forgive me? Eric kicks him right in the gut. So you drugged my wife? And dared to impersonate me?" I suddenly look up at Eric. Henry stares blankly at Eric. "It was you?" Finally, everything clicks for me. It was Eric who saved me back then. But Henry pretended to be him, and under Judy's orders, he used this excuse to get close to me. Everything started from Judy's lies. I take a deep breath and turn off the recording. "Eric, call the cops." Eric nods and dials the number. Judy rushes over, trying to grab the phone. "You can't call the police, you can't." Henry holds her back, grinning like some evil creature. "Scared now? If Tina doesn't forgive me, you won't get away either." While the two were wrestling, Eric had already made the call. Judy tries to escape but can't break free. In a panic, she grabs a brick and viciously smashes it on Henry's head. While hitting, she mutters, "It's your stupidity, believing everything I say. If you promise to help me, do it right." Eric, worried she might turn on me, detains her while she's distracted. Soon, sirens are wailing. Judy points at Henry on the ground. He did it, I had nothing to do with it. Almost at the same time, Eric and I take out our phones. We have the recording. She confessed it herself. You could see the color drain from Judy's face. It's already late night when we get back to the hotel. I finally ask the question that's been gnawing at me. If you were the one back then, why didn't you tell me? Eric sighs, looking a bit gloomy. After I took you to the hospital, my mom suddenly fell ill, and since you were safe for the moment, I went home to see her. Who knew when I saw you again, you were all chummy with Henry. I didn't know then that it was him and Judy's doing. Seeing how you looked at him, I left the country to nurse my heartbreak. Later, Cindy mentioned something odd between Henry and Judy, so I rushed back, just in time to see you crashing the wedding. Cindy was the one who told me about seeing them kiss. I asked again, what's the deal with you and Judy? I always felt she was a bit off. I barely interacted with Eric, yet she said I was clinging to him, ruining their relationship. Eric looks like he's got a toothache. It was during one of Henry's birthdays that she fell for me at first sight. Since then, she's been clinging to me every day. He left for 2 reasons. Seeing me with Henry broke his heart, and to escape Judy's pestering. I nestled into his arms. No wonder the first thing you did when we met again was to hijack the wedding. You were planning it all along. Eric snorts proudly. I was ready to quietly give my blessings. But that idiot had to screw himself over. He kisses me tenderly. We were meant for each other, being so in sync with the recording. When Henry showed up, I sensed something was off and turned on the recording feature. I didn't expect much. But they just kept unleashing everything, selling each other out completely. With these recordings, they won't be coming out anytime soon. We later found out that Judy hit Henry pretty hard. When Helen saw the situation, realizing Judy not only used her son but also tarnished the family name, and finally turned on her son, she was quick to cut ties with Judy, even announcing it in the papers. She also used her family's influence. Looks like Judy won't have it easy. Seeing Eric's smug face, I suddenly remember all his past flip-flopping moments and decide to tease him. I pull away from him and pretend to take off the ring. By the way, you said this ring was borrowed, so return it to the owner. Just as I manage to halfway remove it, Eric pushes it back on. He grits his teeth. Didn't you see our initials engraved inside the ring? And where would I find someone to borrow a ring that fits so perfectly? I play dumb. You said it yourself. Oh, you also said after it's all over, you'd break up. Before I can finish, Eric silences me with a kiss. When my legs finally give way, he lets go. You believe everything I say? Then listen, tonight. He whispers the last few words, and I shove him away. No way. Eric pulls me back. No, I don't get it. By the end, I don't even have the strength to bite him. I swear, starting tomorrow, I'm sleeping in a separate room from Eric. But just as I make the threat, Eric shows me in no uncertain terms. Some things aren't meant to be said.